All right, it is 6:30 and we're going to go ahead and get started. I'd like to welcome you to the Harris County Flood Control District's virtual community engagement meeting to discuss the Kingwood Area Drainage Analysis. This virtual community meeting is being offered by the Flood Control District to continue to share vital information with the community during this period when in-person public meetings have been suspended due to safety concerns from the COVID-19 pandemic. My name is Sheldra Brigham. I'm with the Flood Control District's communications team. I'm joined tonight by a team of Flood Control District leadership and subject matter experts to ensure we continue to keep you up to date on these important flood mitigation projects in your community. We are also joined by staff from area elected officials' offices and community associations. And Harris County Precinct 4 Commissioner Jack Cagle has this message to share with you this evening.
I'm Jack Cagle, your Commissioner of Harris County Precinct 4. I'd like to thank you for participating in tonight's information exchange and a public engagement meeting. This is a great opportunity for us to be able to get your input as well as to inform our communities what's going on in the neighborhood. I'd like to thank the very hardworking and highly skilled team at the Harris County Flood Control District for their tireless efforts to protect all of us, the citizens of Harris County, from the threats of future flooding. I'd also like to thank again you for taking time out of your day to participate in this meeting. Your continued input and involvement will ensure that we are as strong and as healthy and as protected as we could possibly be. Tonight's discussion will focus on future improvements to the drainage around the Kingwood area that we hope to positively impact our neighborhoods. This is a joint project of Harris County Flood Control, the Lake Houston Redevelopment Authority, and the City of Houston. And it is going to deal with drainage studies of the streams in the greater Kingwood area. These improvements will help preserve our way of life, continue to make our communities a wonderful place to live, breathe, work, and play, and have our being. Again, your engagement is important to me, your Commissioner, Harris County Precinct 4, and important to your community, your city, and your fellow citizens. It's a crucial part of being successful at the Harris County Flood Control District. Thank you for your help. Thank you for your participation, and blessings.
And thank you for that message, Commissioner Cagle. It is such a pleasure to see the community so engaged in this project, and we look forward to continuing to share updates and keeping all of you in the community informed. So here's how everything will work this evening. We're going to start with a presentation to share information about the Kingwood Area Drainage Analysis. The presentation will be followed by a virtual question and answer session with Flood Control District team members and with you at home. You will be able to submit comments and questions through the website or by phone. Any comments not addressed during the Q&A session will receive a response from the Flood Control District after the comment period. We've listed instructions on how you can participate in this virtual open house on slides, on this virtual meeting webpage, and on the Flood Control District's website. Now, please note that this meeting is being recorded and it'll be placed on the district's YouTube channel in the next few days. All meeting materials will be available for you to download on the district's website. So really good resource for you there. I will also share a reminder of these instructions when we reach the Q&A portion of tonight's meeting. We will now transition to Matt Zeev, Flood Control District Deputy Executive Director. He's going to share information about the district and about this project. Matt, over to you.
Thank you, Sheldra. Let's see here. Howdy, my name is Matt Zeev. I'm the Deputy Executive Director for the Harris County Flood Control District. On behalf of the study partners, the Lake Houston Redevelopment Authority, also known as TERS 10, and the Flood Control District, I'd like to thank you for joining us tonight. This evening, I'll be presenting our study findings for the Kingwood Area Drainage Analysis. Then our study team will take questions from the public. The Harris County Flood Control District is a special purpose district created by the Texas legislature in 1937 in response to devastating floods in 1929 and 1935. The Flood Control District was created to serve as a local partner to leverage federal funding for flood damage reduction projects. Our mission has greatly expanded over the past 80 years with billions of dollars in infrastructure improvements in the ground. While we are a separate entity from Harris County, the Harris County Commissioners Court serves as our governing body. The mission of the Harris County Flood Control District is to provide flood damage reduction projects that work with appropriate regard for community and natural values. One of the most difficult challenges we face is constructing effective projects that are sensitive to community and natural values in a highly urbanized area. Harris County includes 22 main watersheds, totaling approximately 1,800 square miles and more than 2,500 linear miles of channels. 2,500 linear miles is approximately the distance from New York to California. Each watershed has its own unique characteristics and needs. Tonight, we're discussing the Kingwood Area Drainage Analysis within the San Jacinto River watershed. The majority of the San Jacinto River watershed is actually located outside of Harris County. Our region has always faced the threat of flooding. Our low-lying, relatively flat land and predominantly clay soils create a naturally flood-prone environment. These flooding issues become more apparent when combined with dense population centers and development that has occurred in our region. The Flood Control District works with other agencies and shares jurisdiction over flooding issues in Harris County. This slide illustrates that shared jurisdiction. Inside neighborhoods, as shown on the left side of this illustration, storm sewers and roadside ditches collect stormwater runoff and start the process of moving it away from streets and homes. Storm sewers and roadside ditches are generally the responsibility of the underlying municipality or the Harris County Engineering Department in unincorporated parts of the county. The larger bayous and channels that take the collected stormwater and move it through our drainage system to Galveston Bay are the responsibility of the Flood Control District. This is shown on the right side of the illustration. In the middle is a stormwater detention basin, sometimes constructed by the Flood Control District. When storm sewers are increased, this creates an increase in runoff. Since it is our policy to avoid impacts to properties downstream, stormwater detention basins help to safely take in and temporarily store excess stormwater during heavy rainfall events. Often we partner with the Harris County precincts, utility districts, and others to add recreational amenities such as trails to these basins and along our channels. Every flood damage reduction project is unique, yet each project begins and ends with common and predictable milestones along the way. Whether a project moves forward and how quickly depends on many factors, including the availability of funding at each milestone, shifting community priorities for flood damage reduction, and other changing circumstances from year to year. The Kingwood Area Drainage Analysis is currently in the feasibility study stage on the left-hand side of the screen. The feasibility study involves further analysis of the flooding problems, communicating with the public and key stakeholders, and determining major components of a possible plan to achieve flood damage reduction goals. This is often the stage where the public first learns about a flood control district project. Once a feasibility study report has been approved, and if funding is available, the project or projects move into the project development or preliminary engineering stage. During this stage, the Flood Control District engineers and environmental specialists develop and evaluate possible alternatives, prepare a project development or preliminary engineering report that includes recommendations that meet flood damage reduction goals. This report will identify needed rights-of-way, determine utility relocations, and develop preliminary cost estimates for recommended projects. On August 25, 2018, Harris County voters approved a $2.5 billion bond program for flood risk reduction projects. This vote followed a series of meetings across Harris County in each watershed, which resulted in a list of 181 bond projects. A total of more than $680 million in partnership funding received so far stretches the 2018 bond program even further. The actual timing of individual projects will depend on a variety of factors, including environmental permitting, right-of-way acquisition, and utility relocations. Project lists and projected schedules will be updated periodically on our website. Partnership funding is an important aspect of the 2018 bond program. This graphic illustrates the many sources of federal, state, and local funding that the Flood Control District is working to secure for Harris County. Each agency has its own definition of eligible projects and its own requirements for local matching funding. Before we proceed with the presentation, we'd like to address some of the frequently asked questions we've received since we're here tonight to focus just on the Kingwood Area Drainage Analysis. As general information, the Flood Control District does not typically perform dredging, but we have performed conveyance restoration or desilt projects throughout the county as needed. House Bill 1824, approved by the 86th Texas Legislature, also allows the San Jacinto River Authority, or SJRA, and the Flood Control District to remove material from the San Jacinto River and its tributaries to restore, maintain, or expand storm flow capacity. The SJRA is leading efforts, with support from the Flood Control District, to investigate the feasibility of one or more sand traps along the west and/or east forks of the San Jacinto River to reduce future sedimentation. The Lake Houston Dam Spillway Project is being led by the City of Houston and is intended to increase the outflow capacity of the Lake Houston Dam. This project proposes additional capacity for the Lake Houston Spillway that would allow for a rapid decrease of water levels in Lake Houston in advance of storm events. We've also received many concerns from the community related to repetitive flooding near the confluence of Taylor Gully and White Oak Creek. The Kingwood Study analyzed Taylor Gully from the study limits at Bassingham to the natural section of the channel at the confluence of White Oak Creek. The majority of White Oak Creek is outside of Harris County, and analysis indicates that issues with White Oak Creek are caused by water backing up from the east fork of the San Jacinto River. This would need to be analyzed further as a regional issue. Understanding jurisdiction over the different parts of the drainage network in Kingwood is important. The Kingwood Area Drainage Network includes all the paths that stormwater takes from raindrops first hitting the ground to stormwater flowing out of the Kingwood area and into channels that move water to Lake Houston. The first part of the drainage network could include roof gutters, French drains, or the grading or slope of your yard. Typically, property grading is designed to move stormwater from your yard to a storm sewer or roadside ditch. When the stormwater is on your property, that stormwater is typically the property owner's responsibility. Most residences in the Kingwood area rely on street drainage systems. This includes roadways that have been designed to convey stormwater to roadway inlets that allow stormwater to drain from the road into storm sewer. Some areas in Kingwood have roadside ditches that drain water out of neighborhoods. Neighborhood drainage, including roads, storm sewers, and roadside ditches, are typically under the jurisdiction of the City of Houston, not the Flood Control District. Before the Kingwood area had homes or structures, when large rainfall events occurred, stormwater would simply flow over land to receiving bayous without any obstructions. But now with homes and structures in the Kingwood area, the area's natural drainage pathways were altered. Today's development criteria mandates that extreme rainfall be moved out of a neighborhood through adequate local drainage or stored safely in a stormwater detention basin. However, these criteria were not adopted until around the year 2000. As a result, many neighborhoods in the Kingwood area are at a greater risk of flooding because the original design of the neighborhoods did not provide for these extreme events. It does not mean that the roads and neighborhood drainage systems were poorly constructed. It just means that they were constructed to standards that would not meet today's criteria. Another component of the drainage network is the bayous and channels. This was the focus of the Kingwood study. The larger channels within Kingwood include Ben's Branch, the Kingwood Diversion Ditch, and Taylor Gully. These bayous are filled during rain events from neighborhood road drainage from areas within Kingwood and some portions of Montgomery County. In the Kingwood area, there is a mixture of ownership as some channels, or even portions of channels, are owned by private landowners. But generally, these larger channels are within the jurisdiction of the Flood Control District. Regional drainage channels like the east and west forks of the San Jacinto River also impact the Kingwood area. These channels are not part of the Kingwood study. There is no single jurisdiction with the authority to resolve issues related to these regional channels. The Kingwood study was developed at the same time as the San Jacinto Regional Watershed Master Drainage Plan. While both studies contain the Kingwood area within their study limits, The Sand Jack study is a comprehensive regional plan for the major tributaries of the upper San Jacinto River watershed and will be used to update hazard mitigation plans for each of the participating partners and to provide guidance on regulation. The Flood Control District, the City of Houston, the SJRA, and Montgomery County all participated in that study. The overall goal of the Kingwood study was to evaluate the bayou and channel network that drain the Kingwood area and to identify alternative projects that could be implemented to reduce structural flooding and bring the bayou and channel network up to a 100-year level of service. Level of service essentially means a channel's stormwater carrying capacity. The Flood Control District partnered with Turris 10 to initially analyze 5 streams. However, in order to formulate a better analysis of the area, the Flood Control District expanded the scope of work to study all the remaining open channels in the Kingwood study area, with the exception of any City of Houston infrastructure. We analyzed 19 different channels. 9 were identified as not having a 100-year level of service. As a result of the study, we are recommending 2 initial projects move forward into preliminary engineering. As additional funding becomes available, other projects will be recommended to move to preliminary engineering. To help us fully understand the various reasons for the flooding problems in Kingwood, the roadways, storm sewers, and roadside ditches within the study area were also analyzed. However, our project scope focused on improvement strategies for the bayou and channel network. The portion of Kingwood south of the West Fork of the San Jacinto River is not included as a part of this study area, but will be included in the Flood Control District's drainage analysis of the Atascocita area, which is a separate bond project. In this presentation, when I refer to flooding, I'm exclusively referring to structural flooding, or when stormwater enters homes and businesses. I'm not referring to street flooding. The roads in the Kingwood area are part of the Kingwood Drainage Network, and many of these roads were purposely designed to move stormwater. The concept of building low roads and elevating homes is a common development strategy throughout Harris County. Today, development criteria for roads only allows for ponding of approximately 1 foot of water. A modern design will require the developer to design a path where excess rainfall runoff can drain out of a neighborhood without flooding structures. In Kingwood, there are generally no planned extreme event pathways. So when rainwater exceeds the capacity of the storm sewer system in the streets, which is generally between 1 to 2 inches per hour, street ponding will begin like it did during Tropical Storm Imelda. If extreme event pathways were to be designed, they would need a channel or bayou with the appropriate capacity to be able to handle the additional flows. So the first step in the process to reduce flooding in the Kingwood area must begin with improving the bayou and channel network, which is the focus of the Kingwood study. Again, this study represents the first critical step in the process to improve the drainage network in the Kingwood area. The methodology followed for the Kingwood study reflects current thinking and modern tools for hydrologic and hydraulic analysis, and incorporates the latest information with regard to expected rainfall by using NOAA's Atlas 14 rainfall frequency estimates. However, further investigation for some aspects of the Kingwood study is recommended to further refine the results. During the study, we looked at historical flooding, analyzed how water moves across the ground, looked at the channel's current carrying capacity, looked at the structure inventory, estimated required detention volumes, determined project benefits, and developed preliminary cost estimates. A 2-dimensional hydraulic model was developed for the Kingwood and surrounding areas, which allows the study of both the overland flow of stormwater and the performance of local storm sewer systems. The study identified potential areas that are at risk of bayou and channel flooding and areas at risk of overland flow and storm sewer capacity limitations. The City of Houston has inspected the Kingwood storm sewer network and found the storm sewer systems are functioning to the design specifications which were in compliance with codes at the time they were built. The storm sewer systems within the west side of Kingwood are older and not in compliance with current storm sewer criteria, so certain areas of Kingwood are more at risk of flooding due to water not making its way out of the neighborhood quickly enough through the storm drains. The hydraulic engineering models were used to determine how much water each channel can safely convey before coming out of its banks. Additionally, the hydraulic engineering models were used to determine whether bridges were overtopped during storm events, which would potentially require changes to those bridge structures. In contrast to many other areas in Harris County, the level of service analysis identified several channels within the study area with a 100-year level of service, which is our current design criteria. For existing channels with a 100-year level of service that were located in older portions of Kingwood, a secondary analysis was completed where we reanalyzed the channel capacity, assuming future improvements to the neighborhood storm sewers and roadside ditches. No improvements were proposed as a part of the study if the streams were determined to maintain a 100-year level of service with no flooding of structures. A structure inventory analysis was performed as part of the study. A structure inventory is a tool the Flood Control District uses to estimate the elevation of all Kingwood area homes and allows for us to determine their flood risk. A structural benefit analysis was also performed as a result of any expected lowering of water surface elevations from recommended improvements. As channel improvement options were developed with an assumption of additional improvements to local neighborhood drainage systems, additional benefited structures were also identified. Recommended improvements to the open channel network were developed to provide structural flood protection from the 100-year Atlas 14 storm event within the study area. The analysis was performed assuming improvements to the open channel network within the study area and a portion of North Park Drive within Montgomery County. For the streams that were found to be deficient in level of service, improvements were recommended, including improving drainage channels, which would include widening and/or deepening for increased conveyance capacity, improved conveyance capacity of existing roadway channel crossings through lengthening or raising existing bridge structures or constructing additional culverts, and watershed diversions using enclosed conduits or along existing streams. Due to the scale of improvements analyzed throughout the study area, detention would be most efficiently provided regionally in large stormwater detention basins. To determine additional detention requirements due to increased runoff to Lake Houston or the San Jacinto River associated with proposed channel conveyance improvements and assumed local drainage improvements, a discharge mitigation analysis was performed. It is important to note that this study does not include identification of stormwater detention basin locations, only estimates of the detention volume required to achieve no adverse impact downstream. To reach the goal of providing a 100-year level of service protection to structures within the study area, 6 streams with rights-of-way controlled by the Flood Control District are proposed for improvements, and 3 streams with rights-of-way controlled by other entities are recommended for improvements. While the analysis of the Kingwood Diversion Ditch determined that the channel has a 100-year level of service upstream of Woodland Hills Drive, the existing right-of-way allows for channel improvements to divert additional flow from Ben's Branch. The proposed improvements include channel modifications, flow diversion from Ben's Branch, and bridge replacements. These proposed improvements would need to occur prior to any further proposed stream improvements in the study area. The proposed Kingwood Diversion Ditch improvements would require purchase of additional land as well. The reduction in water surface elevations along the Kingwood Diversion Ditch and Ben's Branch result in the removal of the 100-year stream inundation from 62 structures and allows for local drainage improvements that could benefit an additional 586 historically flooded structures. The proposed improvements also provide increased flood protection for Kingwood High School and the St. Martha Catholic School. This project is one of the 2 projects identified to move forward to preliminary engineering. In evaluating the improvements to Ben's Branch, we attempted to minimize the impact to the natural section located between Woodland Hills Drive and Rocky Woods Drive. However, we determined that channel enlargement was required to provide a 100-year level of service for the areas upstream. Proposed improvements include channel modifications, flow diversion to the Kingwood Diversion Ditch, culvert and bridge replacements, as well as the removal of low-water pedestrian crossings. Following improvements to the Kingwood diversion ditch, the proposed Ben's Branch improvements would also require purchase of additional land. The reduction in water surface elevations from the proposed Ben's Branch improvements resulted in the removal of the 100-year stream inundation from 39 structures. Analysis of the King's Crossing ditch determined that a less than 2-year level of service with significant ponding within the commercial parking lot upstream of Kingwood Drive. To provide a 100-year level of service, we determined that a channel enlargement option should be analyzed. Proposed improvements include channel modifications and culvert replacements. These improvements are located within the existing right-of-way except for downstream of Kingwood Drive near the confluence with Ben's Branch. The existing 100-year stream inundation area does not contain any structures. However, the proposed improvements significantly reduce the ponding within the commercial development parking lot north of Kingwood Drive and allow for local drainage improvements that could benefit 18 historically flooded structures. Analysis of these streams located near Kingwood Place, near the Kingwood Place Village community, determined a 100-year level of service for Flood Control District Unit G103-3801 and a 25-year level of service for Unit G103-3801.1. To provide a 100-year level of service for Unit G103-3801.1, a channel enlargement improvement option was analyzed for both streams downstream of the confluence with Unit G103-3801.1. Proposed improvements include channel modification and improvements to the existing concrete section of Unit G103-3801. These improvements are located within the existing right-of-way. The existing 100-year stream inundation area does not contain any structures. However, the proposed improvements allow for future local drainage improvements that could benefit 56 historically flooded structures. The upper portion of Taylor Gully was determined to have a 10-year level of service with a large number of structures subject to flooding upstream of Rustling Elms Drive. To provide a 100-year level of service for Taylor Gully, 2 miles of conveyance improvements are recommended from the upper limits of the channel to an existing channel drop structure located near Maple Bend Drive. Taylor Gully channel improvements include a concrete low-flow structure. This approach allows for improving the level of service without large land purchases. The reduction in water surface elevations from the proposed improvements results in the removal of the 100-year stream inundation area from 387 structures and allows for future local drainage improvements that could benefit an additional 62 structures. This project is one of the 2 projects identified to move forward to preliminary engineering. Analysis of Bear Branch determined a 100-year level of service downstream of Kingwood Drive and a less than 2-year level of service upstream of Kingwood Drive due to the area being naturally low-lying near Royal Circle Drive. To provide a 100-year level of service while accounting for local drainage improvements, channel enlargement and roadway crossing improvements were analyzed from Kingwood Drive upstream to Twin Grove Drive. Proposed channel improvements from Woodland Hills Drive to Kingwood Drive are located within the existing right-of-way. The reduction in water surface elevations associated from the proposed improvements results in the removal of the 100-year stream inundation area from 6 structures. Improvements to the local drainage system could benefit 60 additional structures. Analysis of Flood Control District Units G103-3603 located near Kingwood High School and G103-4601 located near the Forest Cove Community Center showed a less than 2-year level of service with the 100-year flow overtopping the roadway at each crossing. The results also showed the existing 100-year stream inundation areas did not include any structures. To provide a 100-year level of service while accounting for local drainage improvements, modifications to roadway crossings are proposed. Based on the results of the study, we are recommending that proposed improvements to Kingwood Diversion Ditch and Taylor Gully move to the preliminary engineering phase. Additionally, we recommend that the proposed improvements to Taylor Gully be reanalyzed to determine how the use of the Woodridge Village property for detention could modify the recommended improvements. These improvements were determined to provide the greatest benefits. To move forward, A detention mitigation plan will need to be developed and implemented for Ben's Branch, the Kingwood Diversion Ditch, and Taylor Gully. The detention mitigation plan will also need to account for the recommended improvements to the tributaries of Ben's Branch and the Kingwood Diversion Ditch. We recommend that the improvement options be constructed and implemented in a phased approach from downstream to upstream. This approach will help ensure the receiving systems have the necessary capacity and do not result in downstream impacts during construction. Additionally, the improvement options for the tributaries to Ben's Branch and the Kingwood Diversion Ditch cannot be constructed until the improvements to the main stem of Ben's Branch and the Kingwood Diversion Ditch have been constructed. Similarly, local drainage improvements cannot be constructed until after the detention mitigation plan and recommended improvements have been implemented for the receiving channels. It is important to remember there's no single solution to reduce flooding in the Kingwood area. Each of the recommended improvements will take many years to implement, and some will require further coordination with other entities, including the City of Houston. We would like to acknowledge the various concerns that the Flood Control District has received from your community. We understand that there are concerns that we may not be able to address. However, the Flood Control District is committed to working with you to identify issues and work towards potential solutions. Your feedback and continued engagement are vital to implement successful projects that will reduce flooding risks. The Flood Control District has led and implemented maintenance activities in the Kingwood area to address flooding issues and concerns since Hurricane Harvey, including researching deeds to determine the ownership and maintenance responsibilities for all 29 miles of open channels in the Kingwood area. In the case of some channels, no public entity claims ownership. Developing a long-term plan for the ownership and maintenance responsibilities of all these channels. Identifying potential drainage issues that would require additional coordination or investigation before becoming a long-term project. Determining the environmental permitting requirements for working within the tributary channels and the San Jacinto River. Determining immediate projects. These types of projects could include selective clearing or debris and sediment removal within the channels located at Ben's Branch at Woodland Hills, Ben's Branch downstream of Woodland Hills in the natural section, Kingwood Diversion Ditch, and Taylor Gully at Woodstream Village. I would like to thank each of you for being part of tonight's presentation. As we move forward from the completion of the study and into the preliminary engineering phase for the identified projects, we hope that you'll continue to stay actively engaged.
All right, thank you, Matt. Really good information Matt just shared on this project. Now, before we move to the Q&A session tonight, I'd like to share a quick reminder that we'd love to hear from you on this project and others that we're rolling out across Harris County. If you have any additional comments throughout the life cycle of this project, or if you'd like to sign up to receive email updates on this project and others in the watershed, please visit hcfcd.org/14. Community engagement is an important component of the work we're doing, and we invite your continued participation as projects move forward. Now, as a reminder, there are 3 ways that you can submit a comment about this project during tonight's session. You can submit a comment on this site in the box near the presentation live stream. You can submit a comment on the Flood Control District's website. That address is hcfcd.org/F14. Or you can submit a comment via phone. That number is 855-925-2801. You'll want to utilize the meeting code 9541. Now, if you are joining us by phone tonight, make sure you press *3 to leave a message. Additionally, I do want to reiterate that any questions not addressed during tonight's Q&A will receive a response from the Flood Control District after the close of the comment period. Now, the information from this meeting and a recording of the live stream will be available on the Flood Control District's website and on the YouTube channel. You'll also be able to download tonight's meeting materials. Now, joining Matt for our Q&A session tonight are William Conlon, Flood Control District Project Manager, Connor McCullough with Neil Schaefer, engineers Derek St. John with Gage Engineering, and Stan Sarman with the Lake Houston Redevelopment Authority. And now it is time to take some of your questions. Our first question is from David, and David is asking, for us to describe the necessary coordination with the City of Houston for drainage that crossed City of Houston roads. He believes the road bridges and culverts at roads create obstructions that create upstream flooding. Who determines the criteria for analysis and required modifications?
So, Sheldra, I'll take that question. And the flood control district team has been coordinating very closely with the City of Houston throughout this study, and we coordinate closely with the City of Houston on many projects throughout the city and throughout Harris County. The criteria for analysis and required modifications is based on the current drainage criteria for the City of Houston in their infrastructure design manual, and the flood control district in our policy criteria and procedure manual. So in some cases, road or bridge crossings can be a restriction of flow, and the study team analyzed each one of those crossings in those hydraulic engineering models that I discussed, and wrote up information about that in the detailed report.
Thank you, Matt. Next question is from Jeff M. And Jeff says, there's a culvert at Rustling Elms on Taylor Gully that has become overwhelmed during extreme rain events 3 times in the past 3 years. When this happens, it backs up and spreads the runoff, turning Elm Grove Village into a detention pond. Will the Taylor Gully be expanded by widening and or deepening?
I'm going to let Derek with Gage Engineering answer that question, as he led the hydraulic engineering effort on Taylor Gully.
Thank you, Matt. The Rustling Elms culvert, the culvert in question, it's certainly part of the problem on Taylor Gully. It's not a silver bullet. If the bridge is removed, most of the homes that experienced flooding in the previous recent events would likely continue to flood. So again, it's part of the problem, but it's not the only problem. The larger problem is the overall capacity of Taylor Gully. The gully does not have capacity to convey large flow events, the 100-year event. The proposed Taylor Gully channel improvements will deepen the channel and lower the water surface elevation, significantly protecting the community in the upstream and mid-ranges of Taylor Gully much more than they are today. Our target for that project is a 100-year level of service.
All right, thank you. Next question is from Walter R. Walter R. is concerned about the amount of sediment that comes into Kingwood Lakes. When the lake was first built, it was deeper, but now birds can stand in the middle. What can be done with Kingwood Lakes?
The Kingwood Lakes area is that area, the lake itself, is actually owned by I believe a homeowner association or a property owner association. And since that homeowner association or property owner association owns that lake in fee, it's their land, it's their infrastructure, it's ultimately their responsibility to maintain it. I believe several years ago they paid to have material removed from that lake and deepen it, but I don't know the current status of it now. So what can be done is work with the local HOA or POA and maybe repeat that dredging project from the past.
Thank you, Matt. Next question. David S. asked whether Commissioner's Court is abiding with the bond election by dedicating and allocating the bond funds for flood mitigation projects exclusively.
Sure, I'll take that one too. The Commissioner's Court is 100% abiding by the bond election. All of the money that the Harris County Flood Control District is using to implement over 140 bond projects right now is coming from the bond program, and $0 of that are being used for anything else in Harris County. So I can confirm that 100% of the bond funds that were approved by the voters in August 2018 are going towards flood damage reduction projects.
Thank you, Matt. Alan Shepard is asking, how does the city's North Park Drive project work with this?
I'd like Stan Sarman to address that question.
Okay, thank you, Matt. I appreciate that. On the, we are currently completing the construction plans, or we are at the 60% level of construction plans, and we're currently planning on including in the median of North Park Drive adequate storm sewer facilities that will provide inline detention for the improvements that are going to be done on North Park Drive. So there will be no or minimal, there will be no impact to the Kingwood diversion ditch, because currently the flow now just goes directly into the Kingwood diversion ditch. So the inline detention, which I believe are dual 8x6 boxes, will handle that inline detention for the Kingwood Overpass project. The easterly portion is still just now beginning the design, so we'll also be looking at that as we continue on the easterly portion going towards Woodland Hills. Okay?
Thank you, Stan. All right. Next question is from Josh Y. He's asking if we're going to look at adding remote monitoring stations to the internal Kingwood channels for more accurate data collection.
The flood control district has a network of real-time rainfall and water surface or water level gauges throughout Harris County and all the surrounding counties called our Harris County Flood Warning System. And there are currently no plans to add more of those gauges on Kingwood area channels at this time.
Thank you, Matt. Next question. Why does the Kingwood plan recommend only 2 projects for PER if the study has identified other needed projects?
The main reason is current available funding. And the first question that people will say, well, you got $2.5 billion in the bond, so you should have plenty of money, which is a common reaction that we get. But each dollar in that $2.5 billion is allocated to specific projects. And the amount of money that was allocated for projects in the Kingwood area is not enough to take on more than those first 2 projects. But the Flood Control District will continue to work to find additional funds either through grants, through other government agencies, or partners or partnership projects with other government agencies to keep these projects moving forward now that they've been identified.
Thank you, Matt. Next question. Why does water in the eastern portion of Kingwood drain more effectively than the western portion of Kingwood?
William, do you want to take that one?
Sure. So the western portions of Kingwood were built back in the 70s. The design criteria, as we kind of talked about, were not as robust as they are today. So it did not include extreme event sheet flow paths, which were adopted kind of in the late 90s, early 2000s, and also did not have detention requirements, which were adopted in the late 80s. So the areas didn't have those extreme event sheet flow paths. They didn't have requirements in maximum ponding depth that would be allowed. So they were sized for a different event. The newer sections on the eastern side do have those detention and extreme event sheet flow paths taken into consideration, as well as a slightly larger baseline rainfall amount that the storm sewer pipes were designed on, and they are a little bit bigger in their design.
Thanks, Will. Next question. Who will pay for and conduct maintenance of these projects once they are constructed?
The Flood Control District and hopefully some funding partners will pay for the projects. We work to apply for and hopefully receive grants from the state and federal government. And also we work to enter into partnership projects with local entities such as some of the local municipalities in Harris County and municipal utility district. And then once these projects are built, the Flood Control District will maintain them in perpetuity.
Thank you, Matt. Luann is asking about the timeline of this project. She's asking, why are we still in the first stage of feasibility 2 years post-bond election?
Luann, that's a good question. We get asked that a lot. Believe it or not, this project moved very quickly compared to other feasibility studies of this size and this complexity. This project, the bond election passed in August 2018. The flood control district didn't receive funding until November of 2018. And then we were able to start projects in December and January, December 2018, January 2019. And so there was quite a bit of work that took place, and this feasibility study was done on schedule and on budget. And a lot of projects that we do take longer than most people think. But this project actually moved very quickly, and we have funding to move immediately into preliminary engineering when we finalize this study after the meeting tonight and we wrap up a few things. So I know it seems like a long time, and 2 years is a long time. It's 2 hurricane seasons, and trust me, no one feels the pressure more than the Harris County Flood Control District. But we are working as quickly as we can to get these projects into construction.
Thank you, Matt. Next question is from Bob Rehack. He's asking if improvements to the diversion ditch means that you don't need to widen the natural section of Ben's Branch.
I'll ask William to handle that, and he might need to get Connor or Derek to go into detail.
Sure. So the diversion ditch does have its main purpose of diverting as much flow from the Montgomery County side as possible and alleviating the flows that go into Ben's Branch. We do have improvements to Ben's Branch. We do have plans to widen Ben's Branch. As you can see on this slide, there's about $12 million in additional right-of-way. Now, the majority of that is downstream. We do plan to leave that kind of center section that is the nature preserve. As you can kind of see on the exhibit, that it has a pretty wide flood swath through there, and we're going to maintain that. But the areas upstream and the areas downstream will both be improved. Connor, do you want to add anything to that topic real quick?
No, I can just chime in that, the diversion, like you said, it does take the majority of the flow, but in order to provide that 100-year level of service, we found that improvements were required within the natural section to help all the structures upstream of that area.
All right, thank you, Will and Connor. I do want to remind you that there are 3 ways that you can submit a comment during tonight's session. You can submit a comment on this site in the box near the presentation live stream. You can submit a comment on the Flood Control District's website. That's hcfcd.org/F14. Or you can submit a comment by phone. That number is 855-925-2801. And you want to make sure you utilize meeting code 9541. And again, press *3 in order to leave a message. And we'll go to our next question. It is from Carl. Carl is concerned about the water that is now going through Foster's Mill, Deerwood Country Club, and asks if there are additional plans to deepen G103-3304 after it ties into Ben's Branch and prior to discharging into the West Fork of the San Jacinto River and into Lake Houston.
William, do you want to take that?
Sure. So G103-3304, if I remember correctly, is King's Crossing Ditch. Rob, can you jump to that slide? Should be back 1 or 2. King's Crossing Ditch. Well, with regards to King's Crossing Ditch, yeah, I think that's the one right there. Is that G103-3304? Okay. So the question was, do we plan to deepen this area after it ties into Ben's Branch and prior to the discharge from the West Fork? That channel section did have a relatively good level of service south of Kingwood Drive. The upstream had some historical flooding and ponding through the commercial parking lot areas, the HEB, the old Randall site. We do have some plans to improve the channel upstream, and we do have plans to improve the culverts on Kingwood Drive. a little bit of work in the downstream section. It does have a construction predecessor that it really has no value until the southern end of Ben's Branch is improved as it goes into the West Fork. And again, as we talked about some of the sequencing, Ben's Branch improvements, their predecessor is effectively the Kingwood diversion ditch and getting most of the water off of there. So there's a little bit of a timeline to get to that point. But there is, when we looked at the model, the lower section of Ben's Branch, I believe it did not have a 100-year level of service. It was a relatively low level of service. And it does have some improvements through there as well. So there is that sequencing that needs to be taken into consideration. Connor, do you have anything to add to that topic? I misspoke.
No, I mean, you got it just right. The plans improvements for G103, 3304 do include deepening of the channel section downstream of Kingwood Drive. And like you said, there are the two predecessor projects. There's the Kingwood diversion ditch, which must come first. And then the Ben's Branch improvements downstream of that confluence into the West Fork San Jacinto River. So you're correct.
All right, thank you both. John E. is asking if the diversion ditch will be optimized to relieve Ben's Branch.
Yeah, I'll take that one. I mean, in effect, the diversion ditch was set up years ago with a significantly wide right-of-way, I believe 300 plus feet. And it was only constructed about half capacity, knowing that it could be expanded in the future as development came in the north so that more water could be diverted off of Ben's Branch. It effectively has reached that time, and we are looking to optimize the complete right-of-way. We are going, when we looked at the downstream portion, if you kind of see there was that darker blue section right along Woodland Hills Drive. As we started making the improvements and the alternatives, we identified that crossing Woodland Hills Drive with all of that increased flow, as well as trying to get a new corridor through the park, is that Deer Grove Park, we looked at a secondary outfall, a new outfall before it gets to Woodland Hills Drive, and that was going to be our big benefit to get the water out. So we are looking to optimize it. We are looking to utilize the complete right-of-way. The $3.6 million in additional right-of-way is mostly for the outfall, but there's also a few slivers here and there to kind of get to the full width. And then the project will be deepened a little bit as well as widened significantly. The other nuance is the bridges out here. I believe all but one of the bridges were actually designed for the full width, the full span. So there's not going to be a whole lot of impacts to the bridges. I believe there is one bridge that does need to be widened. And Connor, correct me if I'm wrong again.
Yeah, there's actually just one bridge that will require widening. The other bridges were constructed to span the full right-of-way, accounting for future drainage channel improvements.
Next question. Carl H. wants to know which ditch is the Kingwood diversion ditch?
I'll just go back to that previous slide that we were looking at, and the Kingwood diversion ditch is shown on this slide. That's the red line.
Thank you, Matt. Daryl P. is asking if construction plans for the North Park Drive project can be made available for public comment.
Stan, do you want to take that one?
Could you repeat the question? Whoops, wait a minute, I'm muted.
No, we hear you. Someone's asking if they can review the construction drawings for North Park Drive improvements.
Well, I'll be glad to show them to them. We're not distributing them to the public yet, since they have not been approved by the city and TxDOT and UPRR. As a matter of fact, we have some meetings coming up with UPRR here in a couple of weeks to go through the plans and get their comments. But we don't have a problem showing them. We're not just distributing them to anybody right now yet. Okay.
Okay. We'll put them in touch with you, Stan.
Yeah, please. That have no problem.
All right. Thanks, Dan. Next question. Paul is liking the virtual meeting format. Thanks, Paul. He's asking what a well-maintained ditch looks like. Should the ditch be mowed regularly? Is it okay to have trees growing in the ditch?
So a well-maintained grass line channel, the flood control district mows our grass line channels 3 times per year, which we found to be an effective number of mowing cycles to keep the tall woody vegetation down and growing up into the channel. And from time to time, we actually do plant trees in the channel, on the channel banks, and there's different reasons for that. But the vast majority of our channels do not have trees on the banks. And from time to time, we have to go into some of our channels and remove large vegetation like trees to make sure that they function to their full capacity.
Thanks, Matt. Karen Cabillo is asking about the timeline for the Atascocita area drainage analysis.
Hi, Karen Cabillo. The Atascocita drainage analysis is scheduled to begin in July of 2021. So basically next summer, we'll begin that study.
Thank you, Matt. Josh Y is asking about models versus boots on the ground. Can you talk about your surveying process during the study?
Sure, I'll let William handle that, but I will tell Josh Y that flood control district staff and our consultants have walked every foot of these channels over the past 3 years since Hurricane Harvey for various reasons. And so our staff and our consultants have put their boots on the ground. And I'll let William talk about how surveying was done as part of this study.
Sure. So the original effort started with the existing effective models that were already developed. Neil Schaefer and Gage Engineering, our 2 consultants, were out in the field. And interestingly enough, the project kicked off right around the time Imelda happened. So they were out in the field, driving the streets, looking at the channels, literally right after Imelda, getting a much better sense of the hot spots, the problem areas, and the deficient systems. So we did have a lot of boots on the ground during the study from our consultants. We have 2018 LIDAR, which was flown January of 2018. So we've been using that significantly. There's a whole lot of detail that was provided. We did a few survey cross sections at some strategic spots within some of the bridges and crossings, and also some field measurements to confirm or actually remove things that were in the model but are no longer out there. So it's a good mix of existing data, digital electronic data, and physical boots on the ground data. But we did not fully survey every cross section in detail.
Thank you, William. Mr. Davis understands the sequencing discussed, but is there any other low-hanging fruit that can be addressed now to help?
That's a good question. We have been completing several large maintenance projects in and around the Kingwood area. We consider that low-hanging fruit to fix the problems with the infrastructure that exists currently. And then going forward, we hope that we can complete a successful deal with the City of Houston on the Woodridge Village area to acquire that property and construct additional detention in the Taylor Gully watershed. But other than that, we haven't really recognized or identified any quote unquote low hanging fruit.
Thanks, Matt. Mr. James is talking about the Ivy Point neighborhood basin. He said the basin is deeper than the typical height of water in the Kingwood diversion during a rain event. Does this mean that water may enter the neighborhood basin from the diversion ditch and flood the neighborhood?
William, do you know the answer to that one?
I am not familiar with that specific basin. Whereabouts is Ivy Point? South of Kingwood Drive near the diversion ditch?
How about we follow up with them
Yeah,
after the meeting tonight?
yeah, definitely. We will definitely research that and have a formal answer for that one.
All right. Thank you. Gerald P. asked if we can expand on the progress made on the collaboration of Kingwood Service Association, Friendswood Development Company, and Harris County Flood Control District in the Benz Branch upgrade projects to the 100-year flood standard. And he says thank you.
I don't know if there's any recent updates on that. If anyone else, Gary or William, know any more, but I know that we last year we spent quite a bit of time and effort working with the Kingwood Service Association and Friendswood Development to get through some very challenging legal right-of-way issues in order to do some debris removal and vegetation management in that channel. And it took a long time. It was a lot of work, and we know that there's been some reports that the drainage has already improved just from the minimal amount of work that we are already able to complete. And then, of course, this study recommends further work on that channel.
Thank you, Matt. G. Stover is asking if there's any focus on regional development impacts, including local government oversight and enforcement.
The answer to that one is absolutely yes. So the focus on regional impacts. So there's the San Jacinto River Watershed Master Drainage Plan, which looked at the entire San Jacinto River watershed as a whole, which covers, I think, parts of 7 different counties, and has a lot of recommendations. In addition to that, the Harris County Flood Control District is working with all of the municipalities inside Harris County and then all of our surrounding counties in an attempt to standardize our drainage criteria. Right now, there's 34 different cities inside Harris County, and each one of those cities has a slightly different drainage criteria. And then all of our surrounding counties have different drainage criteria: Montgomery County, Liberty County, Chambers County, Fort Bend County, so on and so forth. So we're working right now. It's been an effort we've been working on for several months, actually, to try to get everyone to standardize their drainage criteria so that we're all playing the game from the same rule book. And so that's an ongoing effort. So the answer to those are some of the efforts that we're doing right now that you may not have been aware of.
All right, thank you, Matt. And with that, we've reached our time. I would like to share one final reminder that we are continuing to accept comments and feedback on this project. Again, we have a great deal of information for you on our website for your reference, including links so that you can rewatch this meeting, and also you'll be able to download meeting materials. I do want to thank you again for joining us this evening and for all of the engagement that we received on this project and that we continue to receive. We look forward to continuing to share updates with you as we move forward. Stay safe and have a great evening.